ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another lesson on GuitarWithTonyG.com. My name is Tony G, and today I'm going to show you 3 ridiculously simple tips to learn the major versus the minor. Let's jump right in. My first tip for you today is to learn what an interval is. An interval is basically the space or the distance from one note to the next. If you can learn intervals, then we'll be able to play scales no matter where we are because we can keep track of how many half steps or whole steps we need to go in order to get to the next note of a scale. Let me break that down for you. For example, if I'm playing the G right here, 3rd fret of 6th string, and I want to go up a half step interval, which is very common in a major and minor scale, I'm just going to go up 1 fret. That is a half step interval. On guitar, 1 fret is a half step interval. If I want to go up a full step, then I will go up 2 frets here to the 5th fret here. So if I'm playing this G and I go up a whole step, I will go 2 frets now to 5th fret here, which is an A. So those are 2 of the main intervals we're going to be focusing on today. There are also other intervals that you can look into, but for right now, let's just go ahead and keep it simple and move on to our second tip. Okay, just before we get into our second ridiculously easy tip on how to learn the major and minor scales, I want you to go ahead and hit that like button for me. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so we just talked about intervals. Let's see how we throw these intervals into a scale. The second tip I'm going to give you is to learn how to play a scale horizontally on 1 string instead of playing it vertically. The guitar is very cool because we can play scales very easily vertically in one position, but it's a lot harder to judge the intervals when we're changing strings. So I would prefer that you learn how to do it on 1 string so you can kind of visually see the intervals as we play them. Okay, so we're going to be playing in the key of E major to start. So I'm going to start with my low E string, my 6th string, and we're going to go ahead and start with a major scale, E major. Let's go ahead and walk through the intervals. Between the first note, our low E, and our second note, there will be a whole step interval. So again, whole step is 2 frets. So our first note, open E, our second note, 2 frets up, F sharp. Okay, so those are our first 2 notes. The next interval is also a whole step. So I went up 2 frets from my second note to the 4th fret here. And then the next interval is a half step, so we will just go up 1 fret. So those are the first 4 notes so far. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. And the best part about this is you don't even have to know the names of the notes, because on guitar you're going to be playing in many different keys. And from a musical theory standpoint, it is important to know the key signatures, which notes are natural, which are sharp, which are flat. But for right now on guitar, we're just going to learn the pattern. We just want to stick with these intervals so we can really grasp how we're putting these scales together. Okay, so we've learned our first 4 notes. We have a whole step, half step. Then we're going to do another whole step, another whole step, 1 more whole step, and then a half step to round it off. So total that was 8 notes, but theoretically it's actually only 7 notes because that 8th note that we hit was just the E again, so we kind of come full circle. So a diatonic major scale refers to the fact that there are 7 notes in this scale. So let's take a look at that one more time. So we have our open, then we go to our F sharp, our 2nd fret, with a whole step. Then we go up another whole step to our G sharp. Then we go up a half step to our A, full step to our B, another full step to our C sharp, another full step to our D sharp, and then a half step back to our E. And you could just keep on playing that exact same pattern. I run out of frets up here, but if you have a 24 fret electric, you can easily play that in 2 octaves. Okay? Now, we're going to take a look at how to do the exact same thing with our minor scale, so stick around. Let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at our minor scale intervals. It's going to be a little bit different, but we're actually going to see some amazing similarities to the major scale. So for this one, we're going to stick with E minor. We just did E major. Now we're switching to E minor. Okay, there we go. We're going to go ahead and start with the same interval. We're going to play our low E, and then we're going to do a whole step to our second fret. But wait, Tony, isn't that the exact same thing as the major scale? It is. Here's a little secret for you. This is an advanced tip. Between the major and the minor scales, did you know that there are only 3 notes that are different? The other 4 remain the same. Mind blown, right? So our second note and our first note are 2 of those 4 notes that do not change. So we had the whole step here. Now we're going to do a half step interval. Ah, that's our first note that changes. That's the third of the scale. The third is different between our majors and our minors. Very cool. So now we have the minor third here. Now we're going to do a whole step, which gets us to this 5th fret, which is A. But Tony, we played an A in the E major scale too. I know. This note stays the same, just like our first and our second did. We're also going to do a whole step here to the B, which, as you guessed, is also part of our major scale. So far, out of the first 5 notes, we've only played one that's different. That's our third. It becomes a minor third versus a major third. That's it. So let's go over those intervals again so far. We have our 1 here, then we're going to do a whole step to our 2, a half step to the 3, a whole step to the 4, a whole step to the 5. Now we're going to do a half step to the 6. This is our minor 6. So again, that's actually different than the major scale. The major scale was the C sharp. The minor scale is our C here. Then we do a whole step to our 7, which is also a minor 7, because last time in the major scale, it was up here on the 11th fret on the D sharp. Here it's a D natural. And then we do a whole step to our E. So let's go ahead and go over that again. So we have our 1, a whole step to the 2, half step to the 3, whole step to the 4, whole step to the 5, half step to the 6, whole step to the 7, and then a whole step back to the 1. And just like before, you can just keep going if you want to. I don't have enough frets to go any higher than the 6th there. But that's why I think it's so important to learn it horizontally, because you can actually physically see the different intervals that we're taking. So I want you to try to play both of those scales back to back and work on trying to get the intervals correct for each scale. You might do a little bit of mix and matching at the very beginning, but that's totally fine. Don't worry about it, because we're going to find out how to trust our ears with an emotion coming up in tip number 3. Stick around. Hit that like button. My third tip to help learn these major versus minor scales is to associate an emotion with these scales. The easiest way that a lot of people do it is to associate major with happy, and minor with sad, but you can do whatever you want. If it makes a different sound to you, that's totally fine, but I just want you to associate these sounds with an emotion, because that way when you're playing, you're going to be able to hear, oh, that was actually a major part of the scale, and I was trying to play a minor part of the scale. Or you might be playing the minor scale and hit a major note and go, that seemed a little too insert emotion here. And then you're going to trust your ears, and they're going to know whether you're playing the right or the wrong notes. I think it's absolutely paramount to really, really, really associate an emotion with these, because that way your ears are going to know what to listen for. Don't just try to hit the right frets. Try to listen as well. All right, just before we recap this information, I want you to hit that like button if this video taught you something new. I'm going to go ahead and jump through both of these scales horizontally so that you can hear the difference and see the difference. Let's start with our E major. So again, we have a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and a half step. Now, in our E minor, it's going to sound a little bit different. We have our whole step again, then we have our half step, a whole step, another whole step, a half step, a whole step, and a whole step. before we leave, I want to give you just a little bit an advanced tip for sticking around to the end of this video. We call our fourths and our fifths of these scales perfect fourths and perfect fifths. Because as we saw between both our major and our minor scale, the fourth note of the scale and the fifth note of the scale were the same throughout both scales. You might be saying, Tony, the 2 was 2. How come the 2 isn't perfect? Let me just tell you, the 2 is just fine the way it is. But we don't describe it as a perfect 2 because the 2 can actually slightly change depending on some subtle variations we can make later on. But don't worry about that for right now. Just rely on the perfect fourth and perfect fifth. And just know that the 2 is trying to do its best, okay? So, when we're playing those scales, make sure that you're taking a look at which notes you're playing and try to think of those intervals. Because the intervals are great if you know how to do intervals across the strings as well vertically. Then you don't even have to know a scale shape. You can figure out those for yourself. You can say, okay, I'm going to start at this note right here. Okay, I'm on an E flat. Perfect. Now let's change it up. Let's go C. And you can say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and play the C. Now I know I need a whole step. I'm going to play C major, so I need a whole step. And then I need another whole step, then a half step, then a whole step, whole step, whole step, and a half step. I just played a C major scale using those same intervals. So I'm basically just using the same frets. I'm using the same intervals, the half steps and the full steps, but you can do it from wherever you would like. Thank you guys so much for sticking around in this entire video. Before you leave, I have 2 requests. Number 1, leave a comment for me. Tell me what emotion that you associate with a major and a minor scale. And number 2, if you like this video, please hit that like button and also hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you know every time that I post a new lesson. Thank you guys again so much. I'm Tony G from GuitarWithTonyG.com. Keep rocking. I'll see you soon.